To anyone looking in from the outside, David and Samantha Wilkins were the damn near picture-perfect couple. He was a software engineer for a hot tech startup, brilliant with code but plagued by a streak of awkwardness in social situations that Samantha offset with her bold, outgoing nature. She was a real estate shark, top seller at the premier homes firm 3 years running. Together, they made one hell of a power couple, smart, successful, and by all appearances, deliriously happy. Their origin story read like a romantic comedy premise. David the shy brainiac, Samantha the vivacious beauty, colliding at a mutual friend's rager of a housewarming party. She had been newly single after dumping her Dutch-bag boyfriend. He was the perpetually single guy whose friends were constantly trying to set him up. Liquid courage lubricated the gears, and after weeks of flirtatious coffee dates, they were an item. 2 years of dating, one protracted period of David panicking about whether he was good enough for her, and they finally made it official with a small courthouse wedding. The white picket fence dream soon followed, a nice little colonial in the suburbs, 2.5 kids, the minivan, and all the trappings of suburban bliss. From the neighborhood's vantage point, they projected a charmed life with hardly a hiccup, she the polished career woman, him the caring dad who allowed Samantha to flourish professionally. Their son Max was a bright, precocious kid who looked up to both of them. But sometimes kids are more perceptive than we give them credit for. If he'd been a little older, sharper-eyed, maybe Max would have caught the unhappiness brewing behind his parents' veneers before everything went to shit. Maybe he could have headed off the catastrophe barreling towards the Wilkins family. But he was just 6 years old, too young to see the fissures cracking the idyllic facade his parents had manufactured. Of course, in hindsight, the signs were all there, little fissures in the Wilkins family Rockwell painting that David stubbornly ignored. Whispers of Samantha's restlessness, her constant need for novelty and stimulation that the steady household routine couldn't satisfy. She'd charge off on a girl's night out like a racehorse bolting from the gate, gallivanting until late with her buddies from the office, while David stayed committed to his regimen of laptop and bailers, streaming the latest masochistic didactic directive game. Then there were the backhanded digs she'd throw his way, barbs disguised as playful teasing. Don't you ever get sick of looking at lines of code all day, babe? So unhealthy, no wonder you're getting that dad bod. Or the sneering put-downs of his poker nights with Mark and the other dudes. What are you, a bunch of frat boys still trying to relive your glory days? He'd brush it off, tell himself she was just blowing off steam after another high-pressure week closing deals, but the comments chipped away at his self-esteem little by little. Not that David was blameless in their marital decay either. He could be emotionally distant when he got hyper-focused on the minutiae of software architecture and workflows, tuning out the needs of his wife and son. Samantha claimed she married the person, not the profession, but sometimes David seemed like the quintessential absent-minded professor, so immersed in tech arcana that the real world faded away. If he'd been more present, more attuned to the shadings of Samantha's moods and discontents, maybe he could have course-corrected before she wandered into another man's arms. But he was oblivious, happily porn-hopping into the looming disaster. It started off as one of those corny, romantic gestures people are supposed to appreciate, but which mostly just annoy their partners in reality. David leaving work a little early, picking up Samantha's favorite Botley Fricey pinout from the wine shop, maybe grabbing an overpriced bouquet too, because aren't those the moves you're supposed to make? He'd surprise his hard-charging realtor wife at her office. They'd open the wine, rev up the foreplay, and head home for a free-range afternoon of uninhibited, childless nookie while Max stayed late at his buddy Jason's place. A tiny redwood-scented oasis in their desert of drudgery. Only when David strolled into the premier home sales office, Samantha was nowhere to be found. Just her assistant Denise, massaging her temples with a pained look on her face. Sorry, David, Samantha's, not here right now. She's over at the Campbell listing with one of our new hires. Going over marketing materials, I think. Figured Samantha was hustling hard as usual, showing the fresh talent how it's done. David fired off a text, surprise waitin' for yeah, and headed over to the house Denise mentioned, ready to ambush his wife with romance. He found the place easily enough, a gaudy McMansion with more architecture than taste. The front door was unlocked, must be legit buyers inside, right? That's when it hit him. The sounds, the unmistakable rhythmic creaking and gasps resonating from the living room. Annie DiFranco's Untogether album cranked up to hot and heavy decibels. Oh no, no, this was not happening. David followed the boudoir soundtrack's breadcrumb trail into the room and, son of a bitch, there it was in full technicolor glory. Samantha bent over the edge of a sumptuous leather sectional, her skirt hiked up around her waist, and some younger, objectively better-looking dude in a tailored suit pounding her from behind like a vicious jazz drummer, clawing her hair, grunting out guttural profanities between thrusts. A macabre and yet undeniably erotic vision that David would never unsee. The jarring scene stopped David dead in his tracks. His mind blanked, unable to process the devastation unfolding right before his eyes. In that moment of stunned disbelief, the schmuck Samantha was recklessly running with glanced over and noticed the gobsmacked husband. Oh shit, he mumbled, rapidly disengaging. Samantha whipped her head around, her eyes widening in panic as she clutched her skirt back into place. David. Oh my God, I can explain. She shot her flavor of the month a withering glare. Jake, get the hell out of here. The kid, because that's what this Tom Cruise wannabe was compared to David, grabbed his clothes and bolted out in shame, leaving just David and the wife he thought he knew. Her face was flushed, mascara runny, hair every which way as she tried regaining her composure. Okay, look, this isn't what it seems like. Well, I mean, obviously it's exactly what it looks like, but I never meant for you to find out this way. Jake and we've been having a fling for a few months, but I swear it was just physical, it didn't mean anything. Our marriage has been stuck in a rut for so long, and you're always off in your own little coding world anymore. The feeble rationalizations and pitiful excuses just kept tumbling out, each one clumsier and more outrageous than the last. Some nonsense about needing excitement, about how David didn't pay her enough attention, about how she still loved him deep down. A greatest hits compilation of Clyde Cheater's remorse that he'd heard skewered 1,000 times on Dateline specials. But the words barely registered with David. All he could process was the explosive fury detonating inside him, an all-consuming rage he'd never experienced before. He was distantly aware of himself shouting, cussing out Samantha in vicious terms he'd never dreamed of aiming at her, calling her unspeakable names that tasted like battery acid vomiting from his mouth. Samantha recoiled, sobbing as he raged at her unrestrained, years of accumulated resentments bursting forth in his anger's molten pumice flow. Vases and keepsakes were swept off shelves and shattered in his tantrum's wake. And through it all, an anguished howl clawed its way from David's core, the mournful sound of a heart being torn asunder, of something beautiful and irreplaceable destroyed. In the aftermath, David did what any self-respecting bro would do. He got blind, ripping drunk, and ended up spilling his guts to his best friend Mark. The two went way back, having been inseparable since their undergrad days at Georgia Tech. While David landed on the software engineering career track, Mark put his coding talents towards grayer purposes, getting low-key notorious in certain circles as an elite hacker for hire. Made crazy money from corporate clients trying to stress test their cybersecurity vulnerabilities. But he always looked out for his boy David. So there they were, David babbling incoherently through a boozy bubbler fountain of tears and snot, dumping the whole sordid tale of Samantha's betrayal on his pal. How he caught her going rear entry with some broadcast fleabag from Channel 9. How she tried to gaslight him with, it was just physical and other heinous lies. And Mark, being a ride-or-die friend, didn't judge or feed David platitudes. He just kept the whiskey topped up and raged alongside him, vowing to put Samantha and her Ascalon side piece on permanent blast. "We're gonna burn that cheating whore's world to the ground, bro. Make her regret the day she ever wronged you," Mark swore, clapping David's shoulder. While drunk, David could only keen out a mournful why yai. His bestie's bloodshot eyes glinted with the first sparks of a devious plan taking form. One that would lean hard into Mark's hacker background to weaponize Samantha's sordid misdeed against her on a viral, meme-worthy scale. If she wanted to dog David in public like that, they'd make sure the whole world saw her for the soulless skank she really was. Once the drunken pity party wound down, Mark got down to business executing his nefarious scheme. Being the whiz with computer wizardry that he was, infiltrating Samantha's digital life was child's play. He breezed through her email accounts, cloud storage, even the company servers for premier homes where she worked. A vast treasure trove of incriminating evidence ripe for pillaging. David watched with a quivering mix of revulsion and perverse satisfaction as Mark pulled up emails, text exchanges, even raunchy video calls between Samantha and her boy toy paramour Jake. Explicit, almost pornographic, details of their torrid trysts spilled forth. Dirty talk descriptions of their energetic bacchanalian sessions that turned David's stomach, but also made his blood boil hotter. So this was the filthy depravity his wife had been up to behind his back. While he was busting his ass at the office day after soul-crushing day, thinking he had a good woman waiting for him at home. The more Mark plundered the depths of Samantha's sexcapades, the more unhinged David became, wavering between apoplectic anger and episodes of melancholic sobbing, poring over the vulgar transcripts until his eyes strained. Lovers coded endearments like, "Can't wait for you to $% at and me again like last time, you filthy animal greater than." Talks of rendezvous at seedy pay-by-the-hour motels. Even plans they had for eventually going public with their relationship once Samantha got things settled on her end. A meticulously curated dossier of everything David needed to properly crucify his wife for her unspeakable indiscretions. With the mountain of incriminating evidence piling up, Mark and David put the next phase of their plan into motion, taking that adulterous ammo and detonating it for maximum devastation on social media. But they couldn't just blast it out on their own accounts. That was amateur hour. They needed to construct an anonymous threat, a dramatic persona to seed the viral wildfire from. After spitballing a few ideas over beers, they landed on "At True Birmingham Scandal" as their nom de plume, awake at their Alabama setting and the implication of sordid drama about to unspool. The profile pic was a grainy Pepe Sylvia-esque image of a trench coat figure, face obscured to maintain the mystery. And the bio crafted a tone of breathless, fox outrage, exposing the chauffing indiscretions of the local elite who think they can get away with anything. "You've been warned, Birmingham. Nobody's secrets are safe from us," just vague enough to pique interest, while establishing an aura of anarchic threat. With the mantle established, it was time to unleash the first bombshell revelations designed to draw eyeballs. The inaugural posts went out rapid fire, a flurry of damning content flooding the feeds. Creepshot pics captured during one of Samantha and Jake's hotel meetups. Salacious text exchanges dripping with sexual vulgarity. A looped gif of the two making out shotgun style in Jake's car after what was clearly a nooner tryst. Each post was carefully constructed to tell just enough of a story to stoke outrage, while still preserving an air of mystery around the subjects. Well-placed hashtags like #ChannelDrama and #BamaRealtor added layers of intrigue without giving away too much yet. And my oh my, did those opening salvos hit their mark. The reaction was swift and incandescent, the raging dumpster fire of a cheating scandal that Mark prophesied. Jaws dropped and retweets flooded in as the mortally fascinated people of Birmingham frantically tried decoding the identities behind the explosive allegations. Coworkers, friends, and random local mean lords joined the rampant speculation. The thirst for more piping hot tea about this unfolding disaster was insatiable, which was exactly what the puppet masters of a true Birmingham scandal wanted. Of course, those first few tantalizing crumbs of infidelity left Birmingham's gossipy masses ravenous for more. And a true Birmingham scandal was all too happy to oblige, an unstoppable faucet of sordid details continuously dribbling out. Each new revelation sparked a bombastic shockwave, the salacious images and transcripts ricocheting through every social circle in the metro area. People wore out their screenshot finger trying to capture the juiciest morsels to gawk at or message to friends with the digital equivalent of an ear cup whisper, "Oh my God, have you been seeing this?" It was a wildfire rapidly raging out of control, achieving total meme saturation with breakneck speed. Within a couple days, the mystery individuals featured in the leaked affairs stopped being some unknown randos and were conclusively ID'd as Samantha Wilkins, the formerly elite real estate queen of premier homes, and Ted Clampton, the smoldering but married hunk who co-anchored the 6 p.m. news broadcast on Channel 9. Cue a million gifs of Michael Jackson eating popcorn as the powder keg properly detonated. For Samantha, the impacts were swift and devastating. Her sterling professional reputation got napalm to cinders as clients began backing out in droves, repulsed by her raunchy antics and cheaters' ethics. The Premier Homes Group had no choice but to sever ties with their former star agent, self-preservation always trumping loyalty with those corporate bastards. Ted at least could hunker behind the veil of his broadcast career, massaging plausible deniability no matter how blindingly obvious the evidence. But poor, disgraced Samantha was left swinging in the scorching hot winds of total reputational Armageddon, her Insta DMs and FB messages inundated with endless spewing vitriol from morally outraged rando psychos. All because some shadowy operator out there had it out for her in a huge way, and there was no escaping the onslaught. As the full force of her implosion rained down, Samantha knew she had to act fast before losing everything. Sure, the professional ruin stung, going from the top realtor in Birmingham to a radioactive pariah in the span of a week is the kind of humbling that could break a person. But what terrified her most was potentially losing her family over this diseased indiscretion. David, her husband of 8 years, bright-eyed Max, her precious baby boy, the two people who meant more to Samantha than all the sales records and fat commissions in the world. So she did what any remorseful cheater would do. She begged and pleaded and groveled for forgiveness, pulled out every stop in the apologizing handbook. Heartfelt self-loathing texts pinging David's phone at all hours, each one more desperate than the last. Maudlin voicemails of her blubbering mea culpas into the void, voice cracking with emotion. Impromptu house calls with puffy eyes and running mascara, literally getting on her knees and imploring her husband to take her back as a faint whiff of Jake's cologne still clung to her skin. "I'll end it with him for good, David, I swear on my life. Just tell me what I need to do to make this right. I can't lose you and Max. You're my entire world." But David was too far gone, his anger calloused into an impenetrable shell of bitterness. His pain over Samantha's betrayal ricocheted into a singularly focused obsession for payback that consumed his every fiber. Sure, she could cry and bargain all she wanted. He'd allow the hollow apologies to linger on voicemail and text chains for perpetuity. But he would never, could never, let her treacherous misdeeds go unscathed. Not after the brutal way she discarded their marriage vows and mocked everything they'd built over so many years. Not after the images he could never unsee, those tawdry fuckpics of his wife's contorted ecstasy as some lowlife plowed her senseless. Forgiveness wasn't even a consideration anymore. No, Samantha would get what she deserved. A life sentence of public shaming and disgrace, her soiled legacy picked over by giggling internet vultures forever. David would keep fueling the true Birmingham scandal's ravenous appetite with an endless drip of incriminating content. No matter how much she debased herself begging, he wouldn't stop twisting that knife until her very identity and self-worth were eviscerated. Revenge was all he had left now, and David wouldn't rest until his vengeance was complete. Of course, in his blinded quest to make Samantha suffer, David failed to consider the collateral damage being wrought, namely the heavy toll his malice would exact on their son Max. The kid was only 6 years old, for Christ's sake, too young and innocent to be exposed to the online cesspool of grotesque allegations rapidly engulfing his family. But in this era of perma-connected youth, raised on iPads from the crib, avoiding that kind of toxic content was damn near impossible. It started with the other kids at Deer Valley Elementary, those little bastards passing around the scandal posts and giggling over mommy's bad behavior like it was a new Batman movie trailer. By the time Max caught wind of it all at recess, the entire sordid saga was Nintendo meme levels of played out for his chronically online classmates. But to the sweet, sheltered second grader, seeing those grainy videos of his beautiful mother in the throes of passion with a strange man, it was psyche-shattering. He may have been too young to fully grasp the concept of infidelity, but the raw emotion punched through regardless. Betrayal, loss of innocence, a primal confliction over whether to be angry at mommy or worried for her. And then there were the barrage of hateful comments to contend with, courtesy of all the bored internet contrarians weighing in with bilious hot takes. Shit like Samantha Wilkins is a godless whore who will rot in hell and would still smash that hot wife MILF, no regrets. People saying eviscerating, unforgivable things about his mom, the person who tucked him in every night and lived to make him happy. Things that bored jagged holes in Max's self-esteem and ability to trust. He became sullen and withdrawn, prone to teary outbursts over seemingly innocuous occurrences that somehow unlocked the well of psychic anguish churning within him. A light went out in the precocious little boy's eyes, and unless David and Samantha figured out how to shield him fast, the trauma could easily shape his entire yet-to-unfold life trajectory. For weeks, maybe even months, David operated in a constant red haze of rage, every waking moment consumed by visions of Samantha's infidelity, an obsessive need to grind her life into dust as retribution. His age was an all-consuming event horizon that warped his entire reality. But even black holes burn themselves out eventually, and the trigger that finally snapped David out of his vengeful mania involved the one person meant to matter most, his son Max. It was an ordinary afternoon, David zoning out and hate-scrolling through the latest True Birmingham scandal comments when Max came trudging in from school. The kid's face was puffy and streaked with tears, his bright eyes dimmed to a hollow glaze. Without a word, the little guy just crawled into his dad's lap and clung on for dear life, body quivering with muffled sobs. That's when David caught a glimpse of Max's iPad screen, the source of his son's fresh torment pulled up plain as day. It was one of the most explicit scandal posts, a zoomed-in shot of some faceless guy jackhammering Samantha from behind, her euphoric grimace etched in vivid detail. The kind of depraved content no child should ever be forced to confront, least of all involving their own parent. In that moment, it was like David's crimson scales finally fell away to reveal the shitheel monster he'd devolved into. All his self-righteous rationalizations about justly punishing his cheating wife collapsed inward in a flaming wreck. Because no prize, no amount of petty vengeance, could ever be worth torching his baby boy's sense of safety and security like this. Max was just an innocent bystander, and David's spite had shrapnelled him in the crossfire. The thought of inflicting such lasting traumas onto his son's psyche over some dumbass custody spat made David feel lower than whale shit. So right then and there, he vowed to end his one-man demolition campaign against Samantha. Not out of any rekindled feelings for her, rather a desperate need to start putting Max's emotional well-being first again. David would delete all his archived media, try getting the remaining posts scrubbed. And if none of that worked, if the internet's entrails forever birth new permutations of the scandal, then he'd sit Max down and do everything possible to safeguard the kid's heart and mind from any more searing violations. Being a truly good father matters more than nurturing resentments. It was past time David relearned that fucking truth. With that mindset reset initiated, David finally felt prepared to confront Samantha again. This time without any of the towering rage or thirst for payback clouding his judgment. He invited her over to the house, not the Marshall home they'd once shared, but not some impersonal square like a lawyer's office either. Neutral territory where they could air their grievances as dispositionlessly as possible. For Max's sake, not their own. The summit was, let's go with tense to be charitable. Samantha was almost unrecognizable, her usual polished real estate diva aura dimmed to a paranoid wreck, perpetually glancing over her shoulder, as if fearful the shadowy scandal crew would descend on them at any moment. Without her vacuous Shan mom friends and social circle to insulate her, she seemed shockingly small, almost pitiable. But David couldn't muster much empathy, not with the psychological wreckage her selfishness had wrought still so freshly imprinted. What he could do, however, was signal an official end to hostilities. No more ambushes, no more doxing, none of that shit. He'd purge his storage caches, register copyright claims to get the remaining vocal fried nudes deleted wherever possible. Creative material control, or whatever the term was. More importantly, from here on out their liaisons would focus solely on transitioning to and co-parenting responsibilities, period. Divvying up schedules, splitting time and expenses towards giving Max as kudzu-free a childhood as could be salvaged from this colossal shit tornado. If she tried pulling any more underhanded stunts or betrayals, well, David didn't need to make any overt threats. The woman already looked traumatized down to her marrow. It wasn't pretty, nor even faintly amicable, but it was decisive, a lopping away of dead weight, a new beginning of sorts, or at least an ending to their long, protracted cycle of misery. From here, the couple/couple would remain yolklessly entangled only by the logistics of co-parenting Max, fully separating their emotional and financial ties. And maybe, just maybe, that cool detachment could let the healing begin for their busted-up family. Looking back in the rearview, David could hardly recognize the person he'd become in the aftermath of Samantha's betrayal. The blind, all-consuming fury that metamorphosed him from a normal dude into a bitter, vindictive shell of a man. It was like jaundiced binoculars, twisting his entire worldview through sickly yellow filters. At his lowest point, he was perfectly willing to sacrifice his son's emotional well-being on the pyre of his petty revenge fantasy, just so he could watch Samantha's life burn to ashes around her. How fucking sick was that? He shuddered recalling his depths of selfishness, the utter lack of perspective that temporarily transformed him into a venomous internet troll writ large. All because he couldn't handle the ego-bastardization of being just another dude whose wife strayed. His pride and self-worth were that flimsily constructed, propped up by delusional possessiveness over Samantha's fidelity. When she knocked that crumbling facade down by cheating, he lashed out like a cornered animal instead of carrying himself with any semblance of dignity or self-control. The harrowing reality was, if David hadn't course-corrected when he did, he could have permanently maimed Max in ways the poor kid might never recover from. All the psychological rubble and emotional scaring heaped on from being the internet's civilian casualty in mom and dad's virtual war. That's the kind of lasting anguish Dave damn near inflicted on his own flesh and blood, just to feed his monstrous ego and hurt Samantha in one of the most flagrantly unhealthy ways imaginable. It was a potent reminder that nothing, no slight or infidelity, no spite-fueled vendetta, can ever take priority over protecting the well-being of your children. Not if you want to call yourself anything approximating a good parent. David vowed to never lose sight of that juggernaut truth again. Of course, the road to fully recovering from Samantha's betrayal was a long, winding son of a bitch. Simply flipping a mental switch to terminate his harassment campaign didn't magically undo all the hurt and anger knotted up inside David. He spent many more sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, replaying their sordid implosion in his mind's eye like some traumatic Zapruder film slice, imagining new, crueler punishments he thankfully never acted upon. But with the all-consuming obsession of vengeance off his back, it gradually got, well, not easier per se, but more manageable. Little by little, David clawed his way towards some semblance of perspective and hard-earned wisdom. He came to recognize that Samantha's unfaithfulness, while hugely hurtful, didn't represent the sum total failure of their marriage. They shared beautiful, irreplaceable moments too. Max's birth, that romantic anniversary trip to Napa, all the smaller joys and intimacies that get taken for granted. Appreciating those helped offset the acrimonious way things ended. Most critically, David recommitted himself to channeling his energy towards being the best possible father for his son, showering Max with all the love, support, and emotional security a child deserves as he grows up witnected in a broken home, providing a nurturing constant in the kid's life that his own recklessness had jeopardized. With that unshakable priority recentered, David found himself gradually loosening the knot of resentments that had twisted him into such a grotesque caricature of himself. He'd never be able to erase the pain and humiliation entirely, but he could evolve past it into someone better, for Max's sake and his own future path forward.